Hey Professor, so this is going to be the redo of short assignment number 2, and that one was using a reading and telling a story about myself. So the one that I'm going to do over is the story of the museum in Roecanton and how I can apply that to myself. Um, the thing that strikes me about this whole story is how Roecanton is walking through this museum and he's looking at all these photos and he feels like they're looking back at him, and he can, by the type of photo that they are, he can tell what kind of life they lived. So the first picture that he encounters is a picture called The Bachelor, and this is a man who lives very selfishly. He obviously died alone, and his personal belongings are being looted as he's laying dead on the bed before he's even been removed. So he notes in the story that that's not the kind of life that he wants to live or that we should live. Um, then the next photo that he runs into is common people, just people who are doing their job but held some kind of social or crucial social um, job that required them to help society as a whole, and they were there just for that reason. The final one he had um, is a picture of a king, and he could tell this picture was very different because this picture seemed to be looking at him and looking straight through him, like almost into his soul. This man obviously lived for helping people. He cared for everybody, and he had a loving and very noble life. And he's looking at this photo, and he's looking at the regality of this photo and the man in this picture, and he says to himself, it was true that I had always known it, that I hadn't had the right to exist. And I was thinking about that because I've had one of those kind of moments where something as a photo is looking through me. And a good example is a photo of my grandfather that we have. Me and my grandfather were very, very tight, and he passed away a couple of years ago. Actually, many years ago, but to me, it'll always be just like yesterday. And when he passed, we had an oil painting all done up, and it gives him this kind of stature in the photo of he's looking straight down at you. It's a very gentle photo, but from the right angle, it can really look like it's peering into your soul. I can't walk past it without kind of glancing up at it and maybe say that, oh, he's watching me, you know. Um, as far as that photo is concerned, my grandfather was very critical to my family. Um, he was the breadwinner on my dad's side. My grandmother didn't work. Both of them grew up in a society in a little poor town where it was very hard to work. So my grandfather worked his whole life in the steel mills, and then he ended up working construction, dealing with like asbestos and some of the nasty stuff. So he was a primary breadwinner, and then he also had a couple vices um, that caused him to get cancer. So he ended up getting cancer and ended up passing from that. And it was really hard because he, from the time I can remember, always was that central figure in our family of we flocked around him. We just wanted to be around him. He just commanded this kind of presence. I remember I would go up there and I wanted nothing to do but to sit next to him, just because the aura that would be given was incredible. Um, and he was just one of those kind of people. He wanted nothing more than to be with his family. Always wanted to protect them. And when he was passing, and he knew it, it was really hard for him. And I was still too little to really grasp what that feeling must have been like. Um, so it's definitely one of those things where I look up to that man and I go, I want to live my life that way because when I walk past that photo, I feel the same thing that Rocanton's feeling when he's looking at this photo of a king. I'm very much looking at my version of my king. My grandfather was everything to me. And I try to rationalize, like, do I have the right to live the kind of life that my grandfather lived? Did I match his standards? Would he be proud of me, kind of thing? Um, but there's a difference in the sense of how Rocanton's king and my king are portrayed, because we know that Rocanton's figure was a big social figure. He helped masses of people in an entire country. Um, and I, being my grandfather's photo, he didn't necessarily help masses. He helped his family. He was a family man. And I believe that there's a big difference there in what it means to, like, did I live up to somebody? Because I could live up to my grandfather's, take care of a family and, live a good life that I can make sure that I'm loved, and I can do that. I know I can. Um, but I can't necessarily match what the king in Rocanton's case is doing. I can't necessarily do that. But the one connection I did make here, which I'm going to read to you, if I can ever find my thing, here we go, is Rocanton quote, "He had always done his duty, all his duty as a son, a husband, a father, and a leader. He never weakened in his demands for his due. As a child, the right to be well brought up in a united family, the right to inherit a spotless name, a prosperous business. As a husband, the right to be cared for, surrounded with tender affection. As a father, the right to be venerated, and as a leader, the right to be obeyed without murmur." So even though he had a bigger role to play as a social role, he still, at that fundamental level, was still a husband, a father, and a son that still commanded him to be a family man. So I think you can be the family man and still get a photo on the wall, at least in that museum, and that's more than enough to justify a life. But in that museum, the only way you're justifying a life overall is if you've done something socially, gratifying, if you've helped masses, um, which is why if I was looking at that and I was trying to put a photo in there, I would not qualify, because right now at this point in my life, I have not done anything to help uh, socially in some kind of situation. The only thing that I deserve to have a photo is the same type of photo that my grandfather has when I walk past him. That kind of photo where I can look down at my relatives and I can say, follow my example because I think I did it right. Because I do that with my grandfather all the time. And I truly believe that that's the only kind of photo that I deserve at this very moment in time, depending on where I go job wise. But that's really it, because I can't have, up to this date, anything socially acceptable. And that's all that museum is that he's looking for anything, for looking for the meaning to exist, and his meaning is looking for the social meaning, versus I think if he had looked past the social requirement and looked right at the idea of, am I creating some kind of legacy, I guess would be the way I could put it, for somebody to follow, he could have a photo. It just might not be the type of photo that he says that he deserves. But who's one to judge? All I know is that I have my king hanging downstairs and I walk past him every day. And I'll make sure that I get my own photo when I have to go. And somebody else can look up at me and go, I'm going to follow my grandfather. Brendan was really, really good. And somebody will go, well, he followed his grandfather's image. And that's a big thing for me. Family's very important. And I think that the family photo almost means more to me than the photo of the masses, because at the end of the day, it's still your family who you have to come back and face at the end of it. And without your family there backing you, you can't make it to help socially. Because if you can't help yourself and your family, you can't help anybody else.